Some decisions are made in 3 seconds and lived with for a lifetime. Mine was made at the 3rd watch of the night, standing before the phoenix crown my sister had left behind. Hands trembling, not from fear. Because there was no other choice, or more precisely, because I had already chosen before I had time to think. People say the moments that change your life are easy to recognize. The light shifts, your heart beats faster. The heavens send a sign, mine had none of that. Just a dark room, a red ceremonial robe laid out on the table, and the sound of fireworks beginning outside, people celebrating a wedding whose bride had just fled. I didn't know then that the person waiting in the palace already knew I would come, before I even knew it myself. I only knew one thing when I lifted the phoenix crown onto my head, looked into the mirror and saw my sister's face looking back just one night. Only one night. I sat in the sedan chair and counted my breaths. Outside, ceremonial music, firecrackers, the cheering of crowds lining both sides of the road. Inside, sweat soaking through the lining of my robe despite the cool air. Hands clutching the red silk sash so tightly that when I let go the marks would stay. The phoenix crown was heavier than I expected. No one told me that. No one told me the veil would cling to my lips when I breathed too fast. That the embroidered shoes were half a size too small. That sitting in a sedan chair without being able to stretch your legs would make even your knees go numb. I had spent 3 days preparing. Memorizing the names of palace maids, eunuchs, the corridors of the inner palace from an old map my sister had left behind. Rehearsing her preferences, she hated ginger porridge, loved white camellia flowers, had been afraid of thunder since childhood. But no one had taught me how to sit in a wedding sedan chair without suffocating. The chair swayed gently over a threshold. I closed my eyes just one night. One night, and then find a way out. 3 days before the wedding ceremony, my sister began not just once. 3 nights in a row. Each night she came to my room, each night I shook my head, each morning she found a new approach. The first night she cried, I didn't soften. The second night she brought a letter. It bore the seal of the official in charge of palace correspondence. Whether real or forged I couldn't tell, only that it looked real. The contents were brief. It said someone had been planted inside the wedding procession, that my sister would never make it to the palace. That if she fell along the bridal road, the blame would fall on our father. I read it. Set it down. Have you met this person? No, but they know the full schedule of the procession, the names of my attendants. Someone who wants to harm you could know those things too. My sister looked at me. I looked at her. Neither of us said anything more. The 3rd night she didn't say much. She simply placed the phoenix crown on the table, set it out before she even entered my room, before she said a single word. Then she looked at me the way she knew I couldn't resist. The way she'd looked at me since we were small. You know martial arts, I don't, she said it quietly, but it was the line she'd been saving from the start. Just one night. You go in my place for the wedding night. By morning I come back, no one will know, and if I can't get out. She didn't answer. I looked at the phoenix crown on the table, at her. Back at the crown, she was right about one thing: I knew how to fight. If someone tried to make a move that night, I could handle it. If it was a trap, I could escape. That was the only reason I couldn't argue against it. Not because I believed her, but because if she went in and something happened, I couldn't live with that. Father cannot know, she nodded, eyes red. Just one night. I repeated her words to myself, not as a question, as a vow. That night she left through the path they had arranged, a back gate, a narrow alley, a guide whose face she didn't know. I stood watching until her silhouette disappeared, then I sat down and practiced walking, small steps, left foot first. No striding, I practiced until the 4th watch. The Cayenne gate swung open on both sides at once. I didn't look up. Only down at the embroidered phoenix on the toe of my shoes against the blue stone floor, and I began counting, left foot first, small steps. No striding, this was what I had practiced most. Not names, not rules, but how to walk. Because my sister moved like flowing water, and I walked like someone who needed to be somewhere faster than was permitted. 20 years of habit cannot be undone in 3 days. The ceremony officials stood on either side. The music rose and fell with each of my steps. No one knows. I told myself that. Step 17, I strode too wide, half a beat. I corrected. Continued. No one saw. Or if they did, I would pretend no one saw. And sometimes if you pretend long enough, it becomes true. I saw him before I saw the throne, dark teal court robes standing to the right, hands clasped behind his back. My sister had told me about the man at that position. The emperor's most trusted aide. Family name Mo, given name Chang. The only person in court who could walk into the emperor's private study without announcing himself first. He wasn't watching the procession. Not the sedan chair, not the banners. He was watching me, not with curiosity. With the look of someone who had just recognized something and was deciding what to do with it. I lowered my head further behind the veil. My heart skipped a beat. When I looked up again, he had already looked away. Hands behind his back, expression calm, as though nothing had just happened. I kept walking, but that look refused to leave me. The great hall was silent, not quiet because there was no sound, but silent the way all sound is swallowed by stone walls and high raftered ceilings. The music had stopped. My footsteps on the stone floor were clear enough that I wanted to stop walking entirely. I knelt. Then looked up, just for a second, because that was a habit I had. The emperor sat on the throne. He wasn't watching the procession, wasn't watching the ceremony unfolding before him. He was watching me through the veil across the entire hall. Rise. 2 words. His voice wasn't as cold as I'd expected, nor warm. Somewhere in between, like a morning before the sky has decided what kind of day it will be, I stood. I didn't understand why my heart was beating faster now than when I had walked in. Jayadai Palace. I sat on the bed, back straight, hands placed on my knees in exactly the posture my sister had told me, and counted my heartbeats. Willing them to slow, the door opened. He walked in alone. One hand held a book, a finger marking the page he'd been reading. He glanced around the room. Then at me, then he simply took an extra teapot, pulled up a chair across from me and sat down. He poured tea, set the cup down. You don't need to worry, I won't do anything. I exhaled lightly, trying not to let it be heard, just for tonight. I breathed in again. He picked up his book and continued reading, completely at ease, as though he had just said something entirely ordinary. The room was quiet, only the wind outside the window and the soft crackling of candlelight. I sat on the bed and didn't know what to do with my own hands. Near the 4th watch, he was still there. I had been waiting for the sound of a chair being pushed back, footsteps, a door closing. None of it came. He just read, turning page after page, as though this was the most ordinary evening of his life. There's a callus on your left hand. I looked up. He wasn't looking at me. His eyes were still on the page. Do you practice with a sword or a bow? The room went quiet after that question. I looked down at my left hand, a small callus at the base of my index and middle fingers, where the hilt of a sword rubbed during long training sessions. I had remembered to cover it with powder. I had remembered everything except this. My sister had never once touched a weapon in her life. He turned another page, still didn't look up. And I sat there in the wavering candlelight, realizing that this first night was going to be much longer than I thought. First morning in the palace maids came to dress me, and I stood up and started putting on my own robe. The entire room froze. An empress does not dress herself. I knew that, knew it, and did it anyway, because 20 years of habit defeated 3 days of practice the moment I hadn't fully woken up yet. A soft cough, light, perfectly timed. I looked over. The nearest palace maid, small, wide-eyed, her expression calmer than it should be for someone who had just coughed. She wasn't looking at me, just looking at the floor, hands folded in front of her, standing still. I let go of my robe, stood still and let them dress me. No one said anything. But the eyes of the 6 palace maids in the room said plenty. Walking out of the room, I remembered to count. Small steps. Left foot first. The small palace maid fell in close behind me and leaned in. Your Highness's stride is a little wide. I looked straight ahead, kept walking. Drew my step in a little more, and this was only the first day. Breakfast, the emperor was already seated when I walked in. He didn't look up. He simply pushed a plate of toasted bread toward me, said nothing, as though this was something he did every morning. I looked at the bread, then at him. Toasted bread was what I liked most in the mornings. My sister hated it. She only ever drank tea and ate a little plain porridge. That was not the kind of detail any official record from the Ministry of Rites could have provided. He still didn't look up. Kept eating, completely at ease, as though he hadn't just done anything worth noticing. I picked up a piece of bread, ate it, and wondered how long had he known. That afternoon, the emperor left for court deliberations. I shut the door, sent all the palace maids out, then stopped. The small palace maid was still standing there, not leaving, looking at me with a calm expression like someone waiting to be permitted to stay. Did you not hear me? I did. But your highness will need someone. She bowed her head. My name is Kui Lion. I looked at her for a moment. What do you know? Kui Lion didn't answer right away. She simply raised her head and looked directly at my face in a way no palace maid should ever look at an empress. 3 years ago at the West Market, someone pulled a thug back before he could hit me, walked away without accepting my thanks. She paused. I remember that person's face. The room went quiet. I looked at Kiwi Lion. Kiwi Lion looked back at me. Neither of us said anything more because nothing more needed to be said. I turned away, started practicing small steps, counting, left foot first, no striding. Hands folded in front, arms still. Kiwi Lion sat down on a chair and watched, with the expression of someone witnessing something both pitiable and very difficult not to laugh at. Your Highness's third step is a little off. I know. The seventh too. I know. And the Kiwi Lion. Yes, can you be quiet while I practice? Kiwi Lion bowed her head. She couldn't hold back the laugh in time. I saw her shoulders shake slightly. I turned away, kept counting steps. Right then the door opened. The Emperor stood at the threshold, taking in the scene of me walking in tiny, careful steps across the room, hands folded in front, lips moving as I counted silently. He looked for a moment, said nothing, stepped inside as though he hadn't noticed a thing. Your third step is a little off. Kiwi Lion bowed her head very low to hide her face. The Empress Dowager sat in the seat of honor, watching me enter with the eyes of someone evaluating every detail. I knelt. Correctly, I had practiced this. Come sit here, daughter-in-law, let me have a proper look at you. I sat, kept my expression neutral. The Empress Dowager asked after me, my health, whether the journey had tired me, whether I had adjusted to the palace's climate yet. Questions I had prepared for. I answered each one correctly, neither too much nor too little. Then she asked about the time Yun Yu had come to the palace to pay her respects at age 12, with a group of officials' wives, standing by the western lake wearing a green dress. I had no memory of that. That year I had been at home, a beat of silence. I dabbed at the corner of my eye. Said nothing, just lowered my head, shoulders trembling slightly like someone too moved to speak. The Empress Dowager patted my hand. You're too sensitive, child, just like your mother when she was young. I lowered my head further, continued to say nothing. It was the safest approach when you didn't know what to say. Stay quiet and let people interpret it however they wished. That afternoon, Mo Chang sought me out privately, not through a palace maid, not through a eunuch. He simply waited in the corridor for me to pass, then said quietly, just loud enough for me alone to hear, "Noble consort Chun is watching you, be careful tonight." Then he walked away. No explanation for how he knew. No explanation for why he helped. I stood there watching his retreating figure. There was something familiar about the way he spoke, brief, direct, no detours. Like someone with no time for anything unnecessary. I couldn't name what I felt. Only knew that in this palace, he was the second person I didn't fully understand, yet already didn't feel entirely a stranger to. Noble consort Chun invited me for tea, her voice sweet, her eyes sharp. We sat across from each other in a room full of flowers, talked about tea, the weather, the blossoms in the eastern garden. I responded at the right moments, smiled in the right places. Then Noble Consort Chun mentioned the Lantern Festival from the year before. You were wearing jade green that evening, so beautiful. I still remember you standing by the western lake and His Majesty was there too. I hadn't attended that festival. I had never set foot in the palace before yesterday. Noble Consort Chun was watching me, waiting. I picked up my teacup, took a small sip, then smiled lightly. You remember the details better than I do. Perhaps I drank too much wine that evening. Noble Consort Chun gave a polished social smile. But her eyes sharpened just slightly. The conversation continued. I knew this would not be the last time. The next day, Noble Consort Chun came to visit again, this time to ask after my health, her tone full of concern. I decided to play weak for safety. A long sigh, dabbing at my eyes, voice wavering slightly. But I overdid it, too much trembling, too loud a sigh, too much dabbing. Noble Consort Chun looked at me with an expression that couldn't quite decide whether to believe me or not. After she left, Kiwi Lion leaned close and whispered, Your Highness is supposed to be sad, not having an asthma attack. I looked straight out the window. I know. The next visit, Noble Consort Chun invited us both, this time asking about my father's visit to the border region, the gifts the Yun family had presented that year. Details only the real Yun Yu would know. I started to falter. Right then, the Emperor appeared. The Empress needs to rest. No question, no asking permission, just those words. Then he turned to leave, implying I should stand and follow. I stood and followed. On the way back, I said quietly, Thank you, Your Majesty. He didn't look back, only said, Your left hand trembles before you lie, you need to break that habit. I looked down at my left hand. It was trembling. That afternoon, a eunuch scolded a palace maid right in front of me. I turned around. Hey, a man's voice, completely commanding like a general. The entire corridor froze. I cleared my throat, pitched my voice up half a tone. Hey, you. really have no manners." The eunuch dropped to his knees apologizing, face white as a sheet, with no idea why he had just been so thoroughly intimidated. I walked away. Huey Lion followed behind, head bowed very low, her shoulders were shaking again. Official palace documents required the Empress's signature. The Emperor sat across from me and pushed the paper and brush toward me. I picked up the brush, hand dropping into position, about to sign my real name. I stopped just in time, looked at the paper, at the eunuch waiting, at him. He looked back at me, said nothing. I began to write, slowly, stroke by stroke. Completely wrong, I set down the brush. "I'd like to sign again. The ink hasn't been ground enough." The eunuch bowed and withdrew to grind more ink. He was still watching me, still saying nothing. But the corner of his mouth, I wasn't sure. Candlelight can play tricks, seemed to move just slightly. That afternoon, Huey Lion brought me a small piece of fabric, crumpled purple. She didn't say who had sent it, only handed it to me along with a small torn piece of paper. "For the Empress." I looked at the fabric, recognized it immediately. The color of the robe my sister had worn the night she left. Where was it found? A woodcutter on the cliff face to the east, 20 li from the capital. Huey Lion spoke softly. "No body, no sign of anyone having passed through?" I didn't ask who had sent the note. In this palace, whoever knew enough to find that scrap of fabric and had reason to bring it to me, I could only think of one person. I held the fabric in my palm, looked at that color, 20 li. A cliff face. No sign of anyone having passed, my sister said just one night. Said there would be someone to guide her. Said she would be back by morning. That was 3 days ago. I folded the fabric, slipped it into my sleeve, looked straight out the window. Tonight I have to go find her. 5 days after the wedding ceremony, father requested an audience. My father, General Yun, commander of the border forces, the man who had raised the two of us since we were not yet 3 years old. Back straight, stride firm, a man of few words, someone I had never once seen lose his composure. The reason on the formal petition: to inquire after the Empress's health following the long journey. Court protocol did not permit a visit sooner than 5 days. Father had waited exactly 5 days, not one more, not one less. I knew he hadn't come to see Yunyu. We sat across from each other in the reception hall. Huey Lion stood attending to one side. A eunuch stood outside the door. Tea had been poured, pastries had been laid out, everything exactly as protocol required. Father looked at me, the way someone looks after raising 2 children for 20 years, knowing every expression, every small habit that the child themselves doesn't know they have. He needed less than a single breath. Father knew. "Is the Empress well?" "Yes, Father, I am well." "It is you who has traveled so far." My voice was level. Hands placed on my knees, not gripping, not trembling. I had practiced that. Father picked up his teacup, drank, set it down. "The air around the border hasn't been good lately. Father worries." He said it normally. No emphasis. Didn't look directly at my face when he said it, but he called me Kai, not you. I didn't let my face show anything, just nodded lightly. "Father need not worry, everything is fine." The visit lasted another hour. Father asked about eating and sleeping, about the weather in the palace. The things a parent asks a child, ordinary enough that anyone listening outside would notice nothing strange. I answered every question correctly. Both of us were performing, and both of us knew the other was performing, and neither of us stopped. When Father stood to take his leave, I walked him to the door. The eunuch stepped back. Huey Lion turned to face the wall. I leaned close, voice barely a sound, low enough only Father could hear. "I'm sorry, Father, sister is safe." Father didn't turn around, didn't say anything, just gave one small, slow nod, then walked away. Back as straight as always, stride as steady as always, only his right hand gripping the folding fan, knuckles gone completely white. I stood watching until his silhouette disappeared through the gate. That evening, the Emperor came to my room as usual, poured tea, sat down, didn't open his book, just looked at me for a moment, then said, "Your father has aged." The room went quiet. I looked at the teacup in front of me. I didn't know when he had been there, didn't know how much he had seen. Didn't know which words he had heard. I didn't dare ask. "Yes," I said, just the one word. He picked up his book, continued reading, and I sat there in the candlelight, hands in my lap, realizing for the first time in this palace there was someone who knew far more than I had assumed. Far more than I had imagined. The question was, how long had he known? And how much? Heavy rain from the second watch. The Emperor was working through official memorials in his study when I walked in, not to ask anything, only because I couldn't sleep and didn't know where else to go. He didn't ask what I had come for. Simply pushed an extra cup of tea to one side and kept reading. I sat down in the chair across from him, Picked up a book, any book, just to have something in my hands. He read his memorials, I read my book. The rain struck the window, neither of us said anything for 2 full watches. And this was the first time since entering the palace, I felt silence that wasn't heavy. Not because there was nothing to worry about, but because something in that room in that moment let me briefly forget that I was worried at all. Ling Xiao came to visit the palace, the imperial uncle, somewhere in his 30s, easy laugh, nothing about him that suggested he was guarding his rank. He spoke with me about Waiki, about martial arts, about things I actually knew rather than things I was pretending to know. I talked more naturally in that conversation than in all the days before combined. Then I smiled, tilting left, uncontrolled. Ling Xiao smiled too. The Empress has a lovely smile. I corrected it in time, but too late. That evening, the Emperor ordered the Waiki board in the reception room moved elsewhere. No explanation given. The head eunuch stood blinking for a full beat before bowing and complying. I stood in the corner of the room watching them carry the board away. I thought about it for a long time and couldn't figure it out. Early morning, I went to the garden before the palace maids were up, old habit. I ran and trained every morning, skip one day, and my body wouldn't let me rest. I had managed to hold off for 5 days since entering the palace. This morning I couldn't anymore, the back garden was empty. I started running, long strides, steady breath, the right rhythm. For the first time since entering the palace, I felt my body lighten. Not because the worry was gone, only because my body was doing what it knew how to do, and sometimes that alone is enough. Halfway around the garden, I spotted Mo Chang standing in the corner. I slowed immediately. Switched to a graceful walk in an instant, small steps, hands folded in front, expression calm, like someone out for a morning stroll. Mo Chang glanced around, made sure no one else was there. Then looked back at me with the face of someone trying very hard not to smile. I didn't see anything. That's right, you didn't see anything. He nodded, walked away. I stood watching his retreating figure, then started running again, long strides, the right rhythm. As though nothing had happened. The Emperor ordered me taken to the imperial gardens. The sedan chair was already waiting. 8 bearers, curtains drawn on all 4 sides, as smooth and slow as a funeral procession. I climbed in. The curtains fell, the imperial gardens were less than a lie away, the sky was overcast. The breeze was cool. The stone path was flat. I sat in the chair and watched through a gap in the curtain, green trees passing, red flowers passing, a flock of birds I only caught the tail end of. And thought that if I were walking, I would have arrived long ago, would have seen the whole bird, would have smelled the grass after rain instead of the smell of curtain fabric. The Emperor rode alongside on horseback. He glanced into the chair. Why do you look like you're serving a punishment? Because it actually is a punishment. He paused for a beat. Brief, then gave the order, lower the chair. The chair stopped. The curtains parted. The 8 bearers looked at each other, unable to figure out which rule of palace etiquette had just been broken. I stepped down, walked. The breeze hit my face, cool, real, unfiltered by curtain fabric. I breathed in, involuntarily. He rode slowly alongside, saying nothing, not looking at me. This was the first time since entering the palace that I saw sky not framed by rooflines or lattice windows, just a short stretch of road. But enough to remember who I was before I walked into this place. The Empress Dowager asked what I was embroidering for the Emperor. I answered without blinking. A crane, Your Grace. The Empress Dowager said she looked forward to seeing it when it was done. I went back to my room and looked at Kui Lion with the expression of someone in desperate need of help. Kui Lion sighed, got out the needle and thread, sat down beside me and began showing me stitch by stitch. Patient in the way of someone used to tasks that cannot be refused, I picked up the needle, pushed it through the fabric, pulled the thread through. It hurt more than sword training. 2 days later, I presented the crane, embroidered in red thread on yellow fabric, wings slightly lopsided, beak pointing off in a direction that had no clear reason, tail longer than its head in proportions no bird on earth has ever had. The Empress Dowager looked at it for a moment. The Empress embroiders with character. I bowed my head. Your Grace is too kind. On the way back, Kui Lion walked behind me. Her shoulders shook continuously and did not stop. I tucked the purple fabric into my sleeve, called Kui Lion into the room, shut the door, and checked that no one was standing outside. I need you to do something, outside the palace. Kui Lion looked at me, didn't ask immediately, just waited. Find someone trustworthy to ask around the eastern mountains. 20 lie from the capital. Find anyone who saw or heard anything in the past 5 days, travelers, woodcutters, forest watchmen, anyone. If the person I ask is discovered, I know." I looked straight at her. "Do you have someone trustworthy?" Huey Lion was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, but it will take time." "I know," I said again. Then looked out the window, the sky shifting toward late afternoon, pale gold spreading across the roof tiles. "Be careful." Huey Lion bowed and withdrew. I sat alone with the purple fabric in my hand, a cliff face to the east. 20 lie, no sign of anyone having passed. My sister said just one night, today was the 6th day. The Emperor left for a late-night court session, the kind that ran until the 4th watch. I waited until the 2nd watch. Made sure the corridor was empty, then slipped into his private study, not out of curiosity. I needed to find something, a map, a list of locations, anything that could help narrow the search. Whoever had planted someone inside the wedding procession was not an ordinary person. They would have a base, a location, people in the eastern mountains, the bookshelves I passed. The top drawer, memorials, official documents. The second drawer, maps, rosters of officials. The third drawer from the left, I stopped, a folder sealed in red. On the cover, my father's name, the Yun family. General Yun, commander of the border forces. I took it out, opened it. The first page, not a file on my father, a file on me. I turned the pages one by one, a portrait of me at the West Market, the day I caught a child who had fallen off a horse. A portrait of me at the riverside, the mid-autumn night I sat alone and released a lantern. A portrait of me at the gates of the martial arts hall, a rainy morning, clothes soaked, a wooden practice sword in my hand. Notes in the margins, small, neat, written in vermilion ink. Smiles tilting left when genuinely happy, does not smile in social situations. Left-handed. Reflexes faster than average. Tends to stand watching the river at dusk, alone, no apparent reason. I turn more pages, more, 3 years, at least twice a month. Every entry was about me, not my sister, not one page about her. My hands began to tremble, not from fear. Because something had just shifted inside me, something I couldn't name yet, and wasn't sure I wanted to name. "You found it?" I turned around. The Emperor stood at the door, no idea when he had returned, no idea how long he'd been standing there. Looking at the folder in my hands, no surprise, no anger, he stepped inside, closed the door. Pulled a chair and sat down across from me, as casually as someone sitting down to dinner. "Since you found it, I have no reason to keep hiding it." The room went quiet. I stood there with the folder in my hands. Not knowing what to say first, or more precisely, knowing there were too many things to say, and not knowing which one was allowed. I set the folder down on the table, not threw it, just set it down, but with enough force that the sound rang out in the quiet room. 3 years. I looked him directly in the eye. "You watched me for 3 years. Did I do anything to you? Was there any crime?" The Emperor looked back at me. Didn't look away, didn't hesitate. "No, you have done nothing to me." "Then why?" "That is exactly the problem." Another long beat of silence. He poured tea, pushed a cup toward me. I didn't pick it up, just looked at the cup, then back at him, then at the cup again. As though it represented something I hadn't decided whether to accept. "I don't understand." "I know," he said. "You don't need to understand right now." I sat down. Not because I wanted to, because my legs wouldn't hold me any longer. The Emperor looked at the teacup in front of me. Then began to speak, unhurried, direct, like someone who had prepared this for a long time and was waiting for exactly the right moment. The betrothal to Yun Yu had been arranged by the court. He hadn't had a choice, or he had, but the cost of that choice was more than could be paid at the time. The person he had noticed 3 years ago had never been that girl. "It was you." I looked at him. "You've never met me." "I met you for the first time at the West Market. You caught a child who had fallen off a horse, then walked away without accepting thanks." He paused. "I didn't know your name for 6 months, but I remembered your back." The room went quiet. I looked down at the teacup. Didn't know what to do with that, where to put it in my head, what it meant, or whether it meant anything at all. "Is this how you defend following someone for 3 years?" The Emperor didn't answer right away, just looked at me with an expression so calm I couldn't tell if I was complaining or waiting for him to say more. "I'm not defending it," he said. "I'm only telling the truth. The truth." I repeated it. "You followed me for 3 years, let me enter the palace in my sister's place without saying a word, and you call that the truth? I didn't know you would come in her place, but you knew she had disappeared." He went quiet. That silence said more than any words he could have spoken. I stood up, walked toward the door. "I need time." He didn't stop me. Only said quietly when I was nearly at the door, "The purple fabric, the person who found it works for me. I am looking for your sister." I stopped. hand on the door. Didn't turn around, just stood there for a moment, then walked out. The next morning, on the table in my room, there was a piece of paper, not a memorial, not an ordinary official document, an imperial edict bearing the imperial seal, written in the emperor's own hand. I picked it up and read. The title Huang Gui Jun, a neutral honorific, neither male nor female, unprecedented in the history of this dynasty. It did not require me to continue pretending to be my sister. Did not require me to leave the palace. It required only one thing, to stay. Huey Lion stood beside me watching me read. Said nothing, I finished, set it down on the table, looked at the edict for a long moment. I didn't sign it, but I didn't tear it either. Ling Xiao came again, this time bringing a new Waiki board. Not the one that had been moved before. Better, finer wood, as though he knew nothing about what had happened to the old board. I didn't ask. We sat down to play. Ling Xiao didn't ask me to pretend I didn't know the game. He knew I knew he knew, and neither of us felt the need to perform. For the first time in the palace, I was allowed to be myself in a conversation without watching every word. He showed me a move, a counter-attack from a disadvantaged corner, using weaker pieces to draw the stronger ones out. This works in any situation, he said. Even off the board. I looked at the board, thought about the 3-year folder, the edict on my table, the purple fabric in my sleeve. Did he send you to teach me this? Ling Xiao smiled. Didn't confirm, didn't deny. I reversed the losing position, smiling, tilting left, uncontrolled. Ling Xiao nodded. Good. Documents still needed signing. The eunuch still waited. I still wrote it wrong. This time the emperor didn't send the eunuch away. He stood up, stepped around the table, and stood behind me. Placed his hand over mine as I held the brush. Said nothing. Only adjusted the angle of my grip, the direction of my wrist, and guided each stroke. His fingers touched the back of my hand. I didn't hear anything he said after that. Just focused on breathing evenly in, out, steady, like someone doing something completely ordinary with no reason not to breathe normally. The eunuch stood waiting, looking straight ahead, showing nothing. The last stroke was finished. He lifted his hand, stepped back to his chair, and sat back down to read the memorials. As though nothing had just happened, I looked down at the paper. The signature was correct this time, even beautiful. I handed it to the eunuch. The eunuch bowed and withdrew. I looked at my own hand. I didn't know why I hadn't pulled it away in time, or more precisely, I knew exactly why. I just wasn't ready to admit it. A music appreciation session, the emperor seated in the center, consorts on either side, me in the empress's seat to his right. A musician struck a wrong note, the transition between the 4th and 5th registers, wrong in pitch, wrong in the way it was released. I spoke before I could stop myself. The 4th register needs a lighter release on the transition, playing it that heavy loses the whole phrase after. The entire room turned to look. I realized what I had done. Too late. The emperor glanced sideways. Said nothing, just looked with the expression of someone asking what his mouth wasn't. Read it. I said. Read what? A book, about music. He gave a slow nod, looked straight ahead again, didn't ask further. But the corner of his mouth moved. This time I saw it clearly. It wasn't the candlelight playing tricks. He was trying not to laugh, trying very hard but not entirely succeeding. The musician bowed in apology and started from the beginning. I looked straight ahead, expression neutral. Inside, anything but. The emperor came back late after a tense court session. I didn't know what had happened, only watched him walk in, sit down, and close his eyes. A slight furrow at the brow. Both hands on his thighs, gripping then releasing, gripping then releasing. What someone does when they're holding themselves together on the outside while not holding together on the inside, no calling for attendance. No words. I sat quietly for a moment. Then stood up without thinking much, just stood up, poured a cup of still warm tea, set it on the table beside his hand, went back to my seat, picked up my book as though nothing had happened. He opened his eyes, looked at the teacup. Looked at me pretending to read, a page I hadn't turned in 15 minutes. He picked up the cup and drank, said nothing. The room was quiet. The candle burned, and I sat there wondering, when had I started noticing when he came home late? When had I started remembering which tea he drank in the evenings? When had those small things become something I simply knew without trying? I couldn't answer. I wasn't sure I wanted to. Huey Lion came to my room at the 3rd watch, no knock, just a gentle push of the door and a quiet close behind her. I hadn't slept. Was sitting there looking at the purple fabric in my hand. The person I asked has found something. Huey Lion sat down, voice barely above a whisper. That night at an inn outside the city, the innkeeper said a young woman in a purple robe came asking for a room. She was with a tall man in dark court robes, no clear insignia. I sat and listened. They left before the third watch. The innkeeper said the girl didn't look like she was going willingly. The room went quiet, not willingly. My sister had been deceived from the start, not hiding, being led away. The guide she had trusted was the one who had walked her into the trap. The man, does the innkeeper remember anything? Tall, a scar on his right wrist, and, Huey Lion paused. The innkeeper said she could tell from the way he walked that he was a government man, not an ordinary soldier. I folded the purple fabric, a government man, tall, scar on the right wrist, not enough to identify anyone. But enough to know, whoever stood behind this was not a small person. The next morning I told Huey Lion I needed a eunuch's outfit. Huey Lion looked at me. Your Highness is planning to go outside. If you're discovered, then I won't be discovered. Huey Lion looked at me a moment longer, the look of someone weighing whether to object, then realizing it wouldn't matter. She sighed. Went to get the clothes. That afternoon I left the palace through the back gate, head lowered, quick steps, holding a stack of papers like a eunuch on an errand. No one looked twice. For the first time in nearly 20 days I stood outside the palace. The street was loud. The smell of food from stalls on both sides, the sound of people passing. So ordinary that I stood still for a moment, just to remember that the world outside had kept moving while I had been in there playing a role. Then I started walking, heading east. The inn sat at the edge of the street, small, worn, the sign faded. The innkeeper remembered. People tend to remember things that look wrong, and that night had looked wrong. That girl's eyes were red, she said, like she'd just been crying. She sat down and kept looking at the door, not waiting for anyone, looking like someone calculating an escape. I sat and listened to every word. The man with her wouldn't let her go outside alone, made excuses about it being dark and the road being long. But I could see he always stood near the door. Did the girl say anything? The innkeeper thought for a moment. She asked me something, asked for directions back to the capital. The man heard, smiled, and told her they'd be heading back in the morning. Back in the morning. My sister asked for directions back to the capital because she already suspected. She already knew something was wrong, but couldn't do anything in time. I stood up, thanked the innkeeper, walked out. Outside the inn, the wind blew from the east, carrying the smell of earth and trees from the distant mountains. I stood there looking in that direction. My sister was still out there somewhere. I believed that, had to believe that. I didn't know Mo Chang had been following me the entire time. I only found out when I got back to the palace. Huey Lion told me, voice very low. Someone had followed me from the moment I left the back gate until I returned. Keeping just enough distance that I wouldn't notice, close enough to see everything. Mo Chang, Huey Lion said before I could ask. I stood and listened, then looked out the window, not angry. Not sure what to feel. Someone following you because they don't trust you, and someone following you to make sure you're safe are two completely different things. And I still hadn't decided which kind Mo Chang was, or if he was both. I only knew that he knew I'd gone out and didn't stop me. Just followed. That's enough, I said. You don't need to tell me more. That night I went to see the emperor. No knock, no announcement through a eunuch. Just walked straight in. He was sitting and reading, looked up at me, said nothing. Do you know where my sister is? The emperor set his book down, looked at me for a moment. You know, I said before he could answer. I can see it on your face. 3 breaths of silence. I've known since the 3rd day after the wedding, he said it. Your sister is alive. She's being held at a small estate in the northern mountains. I stood still, alive, being held, the northern mountains. You knew and didn't tell me. Because if you knew, you would have rushed there immediately, and I wasn't certain enough yet to protect you then. I looked at him. He looked back at me. I couldn't be angry or couldn't allow myself to be. I couldn't tell the difference right then. Just stood there with the news that my sister was alive sitting in my chest, both lighter and heavier than I could explain. He spread the map out, started explaining the location of the estate, the number of guards, the plan he was putting together. I sat and listened. Watched his hand move steadily across the map, calm, certain, like someone who had thought this through long before now. Time passed. The candles burned lower. I stood up without a word, walked out, poured a cup of still warm tea from the pot in the corridor and set it beside his hand on the table. Went back to my seat, kept looking at the map. The emperor stopped, looked at the tea, looked at me, said nothing. Picked up the cup and drank, then continued pointing at the map, but his voice after that slightly quieter. I wasn't sure he noticed. Late that night, after the plans had been discussed, I was preparing to leave. The emperor asked in passing, voice as casual as asking about the weather. Since you entered the palace, what has been the hardest part? I stopped at the door, genuinely thought about it for a second. Having someone stand outside waiting while I used the bathroom. The emperor was quiet for 2 beats. I'll order them to stand further away. Thank you, I said. That is the single most humane thing you have done for me. He didn't respond, but as I walked out, I heard something behind me. Couldn't be sure what, only certain it wasn't the sound of a book being turned. I went to the garden after leaving the study, not to run. Just sat down by the pond, looking at the water reflecting the lantern light from a distant corridor, the purple fabric pressed in my palm. My sister was alive, being held. The northern mountains, I should feel lighter. And there was lightness, but not enough, because wherever one thing lightens, something else grows heavier. My sister had been taken because someone wanted to use her as a bargaining piece. Father at home knew nothing. The person behind all of it was walking through the court every day as though he had nothing on his hands, the purple fabric. The still pond, the distant lanterns, then footsteps behind me. The emperor sat down beside me, didn't ask why I'd come out here, didn't say anything at all, just sat. Looked at the pond. As though tonight he also had nowhere else he needed to be, we sat there in silence until nearly the 4th watch. The next morning, the emperor called me into the study. Mo Chang stood in one corner. On the table was a map and a thin folder. The emperor pointed to a name on the list of wedding guests, a name that appeared both in his surveillance files and on the route the night my sister disappeared. Han Ming Yuan, the Grand Chancellor. He doesn't just want to destroy the betrothal, the emperor said. He wants to destroy me, and your sister was only the first step. I looked at that name, Han Ming Yuan. I knew it. Everyone in the capital did. The current Grand Chancellor, mid-40s, known as a careful and thorough man, someone no one had ever caught making a mistake. What is his real purpose? The emperor looked directly at me. To make the court discover that I married a man, expose it before the court, depose the empress, destroy the Yun family, shake the throne. One arrow striking many targets. The room went quiet. I looked at the folder on the table. Looked at Mo Chang standing still in the corner, face showing nothing, but his jaw was clenched. There's one more thing, the emperor said, his voice slowed slightly. He knows who you are. He knows the real identity of both you and your sister. I stopped. Our real identity. The emperor told it, unhurried, direct. My biological father's family name was Lin. Not the Yun family. General Yun was my adoptive father, the closest friend of the man who had been wronged more than 20 years ago. Lady Han, my father's older sister, had married into the Han family and given birth to Han Ming Yuan. When Han Ming Yuan grew up, he falsely accused his own maternal uncle, seized the family's wealth, and used it to climb his way into government. My mother had managed to change our family name and send the 2 of us to General Yun before she was arrested. Han Ming Yuan assumed we had died along with our mother. Until the Yun name appeared in the imperial betrothal, he investigated and recognized us. If we entered the palace, if the truth came to light, he would lose everything. Not just his position, his life. I sat and listened to all of it, didn't cry. Not because I was strong, only because some things are too large to cry over immediately. Just sat, just breathed. Let each sentence settle somewhere inside me that I didn't yet know how to reach. My biological father had been destroyed when I was not yet 3 years old. My mother had died in prison. The man who had destroyed my father was sitting in the Grand Chancellor's seat, walking through the court every day, and my sister had been taken, not because of the betrothal, but because we were still alive. The next morning I went to find the emperor. You knew my sister was alive from the 3rd day. I stood before him, voice calmer than I wanted it to be. I was worried, I couldn't sleep. I sat alone in the garden holding her fabric while you knew she was still breathing. The emperor said nothing. You didn't tell me because you were afraid I'd rush off. But did you ask what I wanted? Did you give me a choice? No, he said, flat, no defense. That was wrong, I know. The room went quiet. I waited for more, a reason, an explanation, anything to push back against. He only said, I'm sorry. 3 words, nothing added after. I stood there not knowing what to do with 3 words because I had prepared to be angry, not to receive an apology. Not fair at all. I sat down, not because the anger was gone, because my legs wouldn't hold me any longer. You're in the habit of deciding things for other people and apologizing afterward. Is that a habit of yours? Not a habit, the emperor said, looking at me. Only when I'm afraid. I stopped. What are you afraid of? He didn't answer right away. looked down at his own hands, what someone does when they're about to say something they're not used to saying. "I know you can manage, I know you can handle things yourself," he said it. "I just didn't want you to have to worry alone." The room went quiet. I sat with that, didn't know where to put it, didn't know how much to believe, only knew that I had prepared for many things since entering this palace. I had not prepared for this. I saw Mo Chang burning a letter at the second watch, not intentionally. I was just passing through the eastern corridor when I noticed a small flicker of fire through a gap in the door. I stopped, looked in. Mo Chang stood before the fireplace, holding a piece of paper. He looked at it for a long moment, far longer than it would take to read it. Then dropped it into the flames. I couldn't see the contents. Only saw the handwriting on the paper before the fire took it, delicate strokes leaning slightly to the right. I recognized that handwriting. My sister wrote like that, delicate strokes leaning right, the last stroke of each character drawn out slightly longer. I had looked at my sister's handwriting for 20 years. Mo Chang didn't know I was standing outside. He watched the flames until the paper was ash, then turned back to the desk, sat down and buried his face in his hands. I walked away. Didn't knock, didn't ask anything, but that handwriting, it stayed in my head all night. The next morning, I intercepted Mo Chang in the corridor. Not a busy corridor. I had waited for exactly the time he walked from the study back to his quarters, exactly the quiet stretch of corridor between two gates. Mo Chang stopped, looked at me. Without surprise, like someone who had known this meeting would come, only not when, last night. I looked directly into his eyes. The handwriting on that letter, it was my sister's. Mo Chang didn't deny it, didn't confirm it. Only looked at me in a way that made me unsure whether I was asking the right question or not asking enough. "When did you know her?" A long silence. "You're more like her than I thought," he said. Voice quiet, not quiet from fear of being heard, but quiet in the way of someone saying something they have never said aloud before. The same way of not letting things go. That didn't answer my question, but it said more than any straight answer could have. Mo Chang told it, not much, not little, just enough. 2 years ago, he had been sent to inspect the border regions. Traveling incognito without court robes, he met my sister at a market fair, neither knowing who the other was. Just two strangers standing next to each other in front of an old bookstall, both reaching for the same book. They knew each other for a few months. When the betrothal was announced, Mo Chang returned to the capital and found out. My sister at the border found out. Both chose silence. Not because there was nothing left between them, but because there was too much that both of them knew could not be kept. The night she left, "Did she write to you?" Mo Chang looked out the window. "She wrote, but the letter hadn't reached me yet when she disappeared." The room went quiet. I looked at him, the man sitting there with the news of my sister's disappearance, alone for all these days, telling no one. Not because he wasn't hurting, but because he had no right to hurt publicly. There are losses people are not permitted to grieve. Those are the heaviest kind. That night I dreamed of my sister. No clear narrative, just a cliff face, darkness, the sound of her calling my name from somewhere I couldn't locate. I ran but couldn't get closer. Kept running and the distance never changed. Then the calling went silent. I woke with a start, sat bolt upright, unable to catch my breath, sweat soaking through the back of my robe. The room was dark, quiet, only the sound of wind outside the window. Someone was sitting in the chair beside the bed. The Emperor, no idea when he'd arrived, no idea how long he'd been there. No book in hand, not doing anything. Just sitting in the dark like someone keeping watch over something that might happen, not wanting to leave the other person to face it alone. I looked at him. He looked at me. Neither of us said anything. I lay back down. Closed my eyes. This time I slept, whether because the nightmare was over or because someone was sitting there, I couldn't tell. I went back to Mo Chang that afternoon, not to ask more questions. Just to say something I thought he needed to hear, that my sister was alive. That he didn't need to keep carrying alone what he had been carrying. Mo Chang sat and listened, face showing nothing until I finished. Then he stood up. And knelt. Not in the ceremonial way, but in the way of someone setting down something they had held too long and no longer had the strength to keep holding. I couldn't protect her. His voice for the first time wasn't calm, just slightly, but enough to hear it. "But I will help you find her. Whether you agree or not." I looked at Mo Chang kneeling before me, thought about my sister, the one who had stayed silent out of filial duty, who had trusted a forged letter, who was being held at an estate in the northern mountains not knowing anyone was looking for her. "Get up," I said. "I agree." That night, Mo Chang, Kui Lion, and I gathered in a small study after midnight. Kui Lion spread the map out. Mo Chang pointed to the location of the estate he had already known had been investigating for some time. I didn't ask when. We began laying out the plan, who would do what, who would contact whom, which timing made the most sense without drawing suspicion. We had been talking for about an hour when the door opened. No knock, no announcement. The Emperor stepped in, swept one glance across everything, from the map on the table to each person's face. Then pulled out the remaining empty chair and sat down. No one had invited him. He sat as though the chair had always been his. Next time, invite me. A 3-person plan is missing someone on the inside. Kui Lion bowed her head very low. Mo Chang looked straight ahead. I looked at the Emperor. He looked back at me, no question in his eyes, no explanation. Just sat there, composed, like someone who had just taken exactly the seat that had always been his. I turned back to the map. Continued, for the first time since entering the palace, all 4 of us were truly on the same side. The rumors started spreading on the morning of court assembly. No one said it directly, just half-finished sentences, glances exchanged between officials, whispers that stopped exactly when I walked past. Kui Lion heard it from an attending eunuch. Someone had leaked word that the Huang Gui Jun was not a woman, no proof yet. No one dared bring it forward yet, but rumors don't need proof to spread, they only need enough people willing to believe them. Mo Chang told me that afternoon, voice as steady as ever. But I noticed he was standing closer to the door than he needed to, like someone already positioned for something that could happen at any moment. That night I asked the Emperor who was behind it. He didn't answer right away. Just looked out the window for a moment, then said, "Han Ming Yuan." He's spreading rumors without proof. What for? To prepare the proof. He turned and looked at me. He's waiting for you to make a mistake. I sat with that. All this time I had been performing as the Empress, while the person who wanted me destroyed sat in court every day, watching, waiting. Every slip of the tongue, every wrong gesture, every misstep, he might have seen all of it. Does he know yet what he's collecting? Not enough yet. The Emperor said, "But soon." Kui Lion came to find me early in the morning, face calm but hands holding something wrapped in cloth. She set it down on the table. Unwrapped it. A small cloth doll, the kind people made for children, red robe, black hair. Both eyes had been gouged out, left outside my room door this morning. Kui Lion's voice didn't waver, but I knew she was working to keep it that way. I looked at the doll, looked at Kui Lion. "Do you know who?" I didn't see anyone. She shook her head. "But whoever could do this inside the inner palace, it's not someone ordinary." I picked up the doll. Looked at the 2 hollow eye sockets. Han Ming Yuan was sending Kui Lion a message. "I know what you know, and I can reach you whenever I want. From now on you don't stay in your room alone." I set the doll down. "Sleep with other palace maids. Wherever you go, someone goes with you." Kui Lion nodded, didn't push back. I looked at the doll a moment longer, then wrapped it back up and put it away. Evidence. One day it would be useful. Ling Xiao came to find me privately, not at the reception hall, not at the garden. He waited in a quiet side study, closing the door before I could even ask why. "I know who you are," he said, sitting down without preamble, "and I know what Han Ming Yuan is doing." I looked at Ling Xiao, the imperial uncle somewhere in his 30s, whom I only knew through Waiki games and words that never confirmed nor denied anything. Someone who had stayed neutral from the beginning. "Which side are you on?" "I haven't chosen a side until now," he said, looking directly at me. "But I hate people who harm the innocent, and you have done nothing to deserve being harmed." The room went quiet. "What can you do?" "I can stand as a witness when needed," he said. "In court, the word of the imperial uncle still carries weight. Han Ming Yuan knows that, it's why he hasn't dared move openly." I gave a slow nod. Ling Xiao stood. Before he walked out, he paused. "I'm not doing this for the Emperor, I'm doing it because you deserve it." The door closed. I sat alone in the small room, the first time someone had seen me, not the role I was playing. Mo Chang found it first, brought it to the Emperor, who called all 4 of us in. Han Ming Yuan's plan was simple to the point of cruelty. Wait until there was enough evidence, then personally bring it before the court that the Huang Gui Jun was a man in disguise. The Emperor would then only have 2 paths: depose and punish, or cover it up and carry the stain of deception. Both paths would weaken the throne. Yun Yu was being kept as a backup piece if more damage was needed, bring her out to create further chaos. And the Lin family, the true identity of the 2 of us, would be buried once more. This time permanently. I sat listening to Mo Chang lay out each point. The more I heard, the clearer it became. Han Ming Yuan wasn't moving quickly because he didn't need to. He was letting the trap tighten itself. "What's he waiting for?" I asked. One big enough mistake, Mo Chang said. Or one person inside willing to talk. Everyone in the room looked at each other, not with suspicion, but with the understanding that from here on, none of them could afford a single mistake. That night it was just the two of us in the study, no planning, no maps. Just sitting, the Emperor reading memorials, me looking out the window, light rain from the second watch. I didn't know why I asked it just then. If there had been no wedding night, if my sister hadn't left, if there had been no betrothal, what would you have done with 3 years of files? The Emperor set the memorials down, looked at me for a moment. I had thought about that, he said, had a plan. Had worked out a way to approach you without frightening you. What was the plan? Meet you at the market, get to know you like an ordinary person and just go from there? I looked at him. The Emperor goes to the market. For you. The room went quiet. I looked out the window, the rain still falling, as steady as though what he had just said had no weight at all, but I knew it did. Heavy in a way I didn't know how to handle. You know what I usually buy at the market? Toasted bread, he said, picking up the memorials again. And old martial arts books with torn covers. I turned and looked at him. He kept reading, expression perfectly composed, as though he hadn't just revealed that 3 years of files had been detailed enough to include what I bought at the market. The next meeting, 4 people, a map, and a dead end. Han Mingyuan hadn't moved yet because he didn't have enough evidence. But soon he was patient. He had people inside the palace and time was on his side. I looked at the map, thought for a moment, let him think he's winning. Everyone looked at me. I'll come forward before the court myself. Admit my real identity, but on my terms, not his. Before he can make his move, I'll have already taken that piece away from him. Huey Lion looked at me. Mo Chang looked at me. The Emperor looked at me. No one spoke immediately. His remaining piece, Mo Chang asked. My sister, she's still being held. If I come forward before she's free, he still has that card. I looked at Mo Chang. Both things have to happen at the same time. Mo Chang gave a slow nod. Dangerous, he said. Not an objection, just an assessment. I know, I said, but sitting here waiting for him to move is more dangerous. The Emperor said nothing throughout the entire meeting. After Huey Lion and Mo Chang withdrew, he was still sitting there, looking at the map, tapping the table lightly 3 times evenly, the thing he did when he was thinking. You don't agree, I said before he could speak. The plan is sound. He said, but, he looked up, not at the map anymore, directly at me. If one step is miscalculated, you will be the one who bears everything. I know. Do you truly know? His voice didn't rise, no anger, just different in a way I hadn't heard before. Not losing a title. Not losing a rank, losing everything, including your life. The room went quiet. Are you afraid of losing a chess piece? I asked. The Emperor looked at me for a long moment. I'm afraid of losing you. That came out. He didn't look away, didn't take it back, didn't add anything after. Just let it sit there between the two of us, clear and impossible to pretend away. I didn't know what to say. For the first time since entering this palace, I truly didn't know what to say. It took 2 more days to finalize, not because no one agreed, but because every part had to fit, and one wrong piece would break the whole thing. Mo Chang mapped the rescue of Yun Yu. Huey Lion handled communications inside the inner palace. The Emperor handled the court. Ling Xiao had agreed to serve as witness, but needed time to position himself. My part, the bait. Let it be known that I had evidence against Han Mingyuan. The evidence didn't need to be real, just real enough that he believed it. If he believed it, he would move before I could use it, and when he moved, he would expose himself. All 4 of us looked at the map one last time. If Mo Chang hasn't reached the estate yet when I come forward. I looked at Mo Chang. I'll be there in time, he said. No further explanation. The voice of someone who doesn't make empty promises. I nodded. The Emperor looked at me, the look he'd been carrying since the night before, the look I still didn't know what to do with. I looked back at him for a second, then turned back to the map. We start the day after tomorrow. I sat alone in the small study, candles burning brightly, the window left slightly open, just enough for the light to spill out. On the table was a scroll of evidence, in reality just fabricated notes, made to look real enough that anyone glancing in would believe them. I opened it and read, turning the pages back and forth, making sure whoever was watching from outside could see clearly. I knew someone was watching, didn't look up to find them, didn't change my posture. Just kept reading, calm, unhurried, like someone absorbed in something important, unaware of being observed. My hands weren't trembling. I checked, not trembling. Outside the window, a gentle wind. The sound of insects, the distant sound of the patrol changing shift. I turned another page. Set the brush down as though preparing to take notes. Waiting. They came at the third watch, not one person, three. The plan had accounted for one, reality brought three. The window opened from outside, silent, fast, trained people. I had already stood up before the first one stepped in. The first two I handled enough skill, and a small room favors someone who knows how to use tight space. The third was faster than I'd counted on. He wasn't trying to win, only needed to leave one mark. The blade grazed my left shoulder, not deep, but enough for blood to soak through the fabric. The third hadn't retreated yet when the door opened. Mo Chang stepped in, two of the Emperor's men behind him. It ended quickly. I leaned against the wall, right hand pressed to my left shoulder. Looking at the three people pinned on the floor, the trap had worked. Evidence secured, arrests made. My left shoulder was bleeding, but it was done. It was done. The Emperor came in not long after Mo Chang. He swept a glance across the room at the three on the floor, at Mo Chang, then at me leaning against the wall with my hand pressed to my shoulder, said nothing. Walked straight to me. I was about to say I was fine, the words were right there. But he didn't give me the chance. He just looked at my hand pressed to my shoulder, at the blood already seeping through my fingers, and moved my hand aside. He knelt down, not in any ceremonial sense, simply low enough to bandage the wound on my left shoulder without me having to bend over. He took cloth from inside his sleeve. He'd brought it. I didn't know when, and began wrapping it. His hands were steady, each layer of bandage even and firm. I stood there looking down at the top of his head, the Emperor kneeling before me, wrapping my wound with his own hands, in a room where three assassins had just been subdued on the floor. There are moments you don't know you'll remember forever until you're standing in them. When it was done, he didn't stand up right away. His hand was still holding my wrist, not gripping, just holding, like someone who hadn't noticed they were still doing it. Or had noticed but hadn't decided to let go. I looked down at that hand, didn't pull away. The room was quiet, only the breathing of the people pinned on the floor and the wind outside the window still slightly open. Then, a soft cough from outside the door, light. Perfectly timed, familiar. Mo Chang was standing outside the door, back turned completely inward, hands clasped behind his back, studying the corridor wall with what appeared to be very intense concentration at something with nothing worth looking at. The Emperor released my wrist, stood up. The eunuchs behind stepped in to handle the three on the floor. Mo Chang came back in as though nothing had happened. I looked at my wrist where he had just been holding, said nothing. After everyone had withdrawn, just the two of us left in the room. The Emperor stood looking at the bandage on my shoulder. I sat down on a chair because standing too long was making my shoulder ache. Why were you trembling? I asked. He looked at me. I wasn't trembling. When you bandaged the wound, your hands were trembling. I wasn't trembling, he said again. Voice of absolute composure, the composure of someone using every last bit of strength to maintain it. I looked at him for a moment, then smiled, tilting left, genuinely amused, uncontrolled. Not because the situation was funny, but because something in the way he denied the obvious made it impossible to hold back. The Emperor watched me smile, didn't say anything more about trembling or not trembling. Just pulled a chair and sat down across from me, closer than usual, close enough that if I reached out my hand I could touch him. Neither of us reached out, but that distance I noticed it, and I think he noticed it too. They led him into the great hall on the morning of court assembly. Not the kind of arrest with guards dragging, just two of the Emperor's people standing on either side. A formal accusation laid on the table, and the entire hall waiting in silence. Han Ming Yuan didn't lose his composure. He bowed in proper form, voice steady. This official does not understand where this charge comes from. Where is the evidence? The Emperor didn't answer right away, just looked at him. The three assassins arrested that night were brought in. He looked them over, face unchanged. This official has never met these people. The hall stirred. Several officials exchanged glances. He had denied everything, and circumstantial evidence alone was not enough to charge a sitting Grand Chancellor. Then Ling Xiao stepped forward. This official has something to report. The imperial uncle stood in the center of the hall, voice not loud but sufficient for the entire hall to hear. This official has been monitoring the conduct of Grand Chancellor Han over the past 6 months. There is ample evidence of contact with outside forces, interference with the imperial wedding procession, and the unlawful detention of a relative of the Huanggui Jun. Han Ming Yuan turned to Ling Xiao. For the first time that morning his expression shifted, not fear, but recalculation. Does the imperial uncle have evidence for this? Yes. Ling Xiao didn't look at him, only looked straight up toward the throne. And there is another witness waiting outside. The woman who entered the hall was stooped, her steps slow, her hair gone entirely white. She wore common clothing, no jewelry, no powder. Han Ming-Yuan saw her for the first time that entire morning. His face genuinely changed. Mother, she didn't look at him. She knelt before the throne, slowly, with great difficulty, like someone who had held something too long and now that she was setting it down no longer had the strength to stand straight. This subject's name is Lady Han, the elder sister of Lin Zhangde, the man who was wrongly accused and destroyed more than 20 years ago. Her voice was dry, even. This subject stood and watched her own son do it. This subject did not stop it. This subject has committed a wrong. The entire hall fell silent. This subject's son falsely accused his own maternal uncle, seized the family's wealth, and used it to rise through the ranks of government. The two children of Lin Zhangde, this subject believed them lost. Until today, this subject learned they are still alive. She raised her head and looked directly up at the throne. This subject wishes to confess everything, nothing held back. Han Ming-Yuan stood there looking at his mother, his face for the first time with nothing left to hide behind. After the court session, the emperor called me into the study. No one else, just the two of us. He set on the table a folder, thin, old paper yellowed with age. A record of the investigation into the wrongful case against Lin Zhangde from over 20 years ago. I found this when investigating Han Ming-Yuan, he said, sitting down. You should read it. I picked it up, opened it. First page, my biological father's name, Lin Zhangde, his age, hometown, occupation. Below that was a list of confiscated assets, a list of those involved, and at the very end, two characters stamped in red, not guilty. Someone had investigated again, had known the truth. But this file had been buried, no one knew by whom, no one knew when. I turned a few more pages. Read each word. My biological father's family name was Lin, falsely accused at 35, dead in prison within less than a year. My mother had managed to change our family name and send us to General Yun before she was arrested 3 months later. I finished, folded it, set it on the table. Didn't cry, not because I was strong, only because some things are too large to cry over immediately. Just sat, just breathed. How long have you known? I asked. Since I began investigating Han Ming-Yuan, he said. 3 days ago, 3 days. He had held on to it for 3 days, not this time to protect me, but to wait until there was enough evidence before saying anything. I understood the difference. I nodded, said nothing more. Mo Chang's message arrived late that afternoon, 4 words in his handwriting. She has been retrieved. I read it, folded the paper and slipped it into my sleeve. Kui Lion stood beside me and said nothing. She knew there was nothing right to say in that moment. I washed my face, changed my robe. Went out to the palace gate and waited. The sky had just gone fully dark when the group of riders returned. Mo Chang came down first, then turned and helped the person riding behind him dismount, careful as though handling something that might break. My sister was thinner, her hair disheveled. But her eyes were still bright. She looked at me. I looked at her. Neither of us said anything for a long time. Then she walked toward me and held on tightly for a long time, trembling in the way of someone trying not to cry. I stood still, hand on her back, just standing there. No need to say anything. After Kui Lion led my sister inside to rest, I stepped out. Mo Chang was still standing in the courtyard, hadn't left yet, hadn't gone inside. Just standing there looking up at the window of the room my sister had just been taken to, the warm amber light from behind the curtains spilling out. I stopped beside him. Neither of us spoke for a moment. You're not going in to see her? I asked. Not yet, Mo Chang said, voice steady, but I knew him well enough now to know that steady didn't mean there was nothing underneath. She asked about you this morning, I said. Asked if you were well. Mo Chang didn't turn around, just looked up at that window for a while longer, then gave one small, slow nod. I walked away, said nothing more. There are things other people don't need help with, they only need to not be stopped. That night, the emperor came to my room as usual, but this time was different. No memorials, no maps, no plans to discuss, just poured tea, sat down, looked at me. I looked back at him. For the first time since entering the palace, nothing that needed performing. No noble consort Chun to guard against, no eunuch to watch out for, no rumors to manage. Just two people sitting in a room together with no reason to be here except wanting to be. How are you? I asked. Not about plans, not about the court. He understood what I was asking. Tired, he said. Genuinely, not a social answer, a real one from someone who no longer needed to keep his composure. And you? I looked at the teacup in my hand. Also tired, I said, but lighter than yesterday. He nodded, picked up the cup and drank. The room was quiet, not the heavy quiet of the early days, not the quiet of not knowing what to say. The quiet of people who have been through too much together and for whom sitting in silence is now enough. Before he stood to leave, I took a piece of paper from my sleeve and set it on the table between us. The imperial edict granting the title Huang Jun. Still unsigned since the day he had placed it on my table, the emperor looked at the paper, looked at me. "I'll sign," I said. "But not because you need a chess piece, not because I have no way out, but because," I stopped, didn't know how to finish that sentence, or more precisely, I knew but wasn't ready to say it aloud. He didn't push, just sat there and waited. I picked up the brush. Signed, my real name, not my sister's. The two characters Yun Kai on the edict, clear, without hesitation, set the brush down. Pushed the paper toward him. The emperor looked at that signature for a moment, then looked up at me, and for the first time I saw him smile genuinely. Not just the corner of his mouth, not suppressed. A real smile, soft, like someone who had just received something they had waited for and hadn't been sure would come. I looked at that smile. Then looked away, because I didn't know what my own face was showing, and this time I didn't want to control it. The news broke on the morning of court assembly, not rumor anymore, an official declaration. The Huang Jun was a man. Han Ming Yuan had been arrested. The wrongful case of the Lin family was being reopened after more than 20 years. The entire court erupted. I stood in the Huang Jun's position for the first time without needing to perform anything, without watching every gesture, just standing, listening, letting the arguments flood the hall. One side demanded deposition, citing ritual propriety, precedent, the dignity of the dynasty. The other side stayed silent, waiting to see which way the emperor leaned before committing. Then Ling Xiao stepped forward. He didn't speak loudly. Didn't need to. The imperial uncle's voice was enough that the entire hall naturally quieted. This official would like to ask the assembled ministers one question. He looked across the hall slowly, leaving no face unexamined. Throughout everything that has occurred, who uncovered the traitor, who shed blood to protect the imperial palace? Who was standing here when the danger hadn't yet passed? He paused long enough for that question to settle in the center of the hall. This official asks that the ministers clearly identify that person, and then we may discuss whether to depose or not. The entire hall went silent. No one spoke. The emperor stood up. Not a grand gesture, just stood, descended 2 steps from the throne, stopped there. Looked across the hall once, calm, unhurried, like someone who had always known he would be standing here saying this, and had only been waiting for the right moment, then turned toward me. "Come here." I stepped forward, stood beside him, not behind, not below, beside. Exactly beside, in a position no one had ever stood next to the throne in quite that way. The entire hall watched. The emperor didn't look back at them. Only looked straight ahead, voice so calm there was nowhere to push against. "I know, I choose. Anyone who still has questions, bring them forward." The silence stretched. No one came forward. I stood beside him, looking straight ahead, feeling the weight of the entire hall's gaze on both of us. No fear, no trembling. For the first time since stepping foot in this palace, I was standing here not because there was no way out, but because I had chosen to stand here. I brought the paper to my sister that afternoon, not a title, not an official rank, just an ordinary piece of paper written in the emperor's hand, bearing the imperial seal. Brief: Yun Yu, a commoner, is permitted to reside and live freely according to her own wishes. No obligation to the imperial family, no debt to the court. She picked it up and read it. "Read it again." "Just this?" she asked. "Just this," I said, sitting down across from her. "No title, no rank, just freedom." She looked at the paper for a moment, then looked at me. "Are you all right?" She asked it in reverse. She had just been through all of that, deceived, taken, held, and the first thing she asked was about me. "Yes," I said, this time not a lie. She nodded, looked back at the paper. Her hand moved lightly across its surface, not reading it again, just touching it, as though making sure it was real. "Freedom? Not everyone knows how heavy it is until they hold it in their hands." Mo Chang's petition was placed on the emperor's table that same afternoon. Brief. No lengthy explanation, requesting to resign as imperial aide, requesting to return to commoner status, requesting to remain in the capital. The emperor read it, set it down. Looked at the petition for a moment, not weighing it, just giving Mo Chang time with his decision before approving it, then picked up the brush, approved it. No questions asked, no attempt to keep him. I heard about it through Qi Lion. Mo Chang hadn't told me directly, he didn't need to. He had served in the palace since he was 20 years old. More than a decade standing to the right of the throne, knowing every secret in the court, never once asking anything for himself. The petition today was the first thing he had ever asked for, and it had nothing to do with rank, nothing to do with benefit, nothing to do with anything except one person waiting in a room to the east. I didn't know what the two of them said to each other after that. Didn't ask. Didn't need to know, only knew that that night, for the first time since my sister had come back, I heard her laughing from the end of the corridor. Soft, barely a sound, like someone being careful with happiness because they'd been away from it too long and weren't used to it returning. That was enough. I didn't need to know anything more. Ling Xiao came to find me before leaving the capital. Narrow eastern corridor, empty at that hour, afternoon light cutting through the lattice windows in long diagonal lines across the stone floor. He stood there waiting, without a retinue, without anything. I'm heading back. He said when I arrived, no reason to stay any longer. I nodded. Thank you. Ling Xiao looked at me for a moment, not the appraising kind of look, not the pitying kind. Just looked directly in the way of someone looking at something that had finally landed in the right place after a long time being out of place. You smile tilting left, he said. Like your father, I stood still. He didn't explain further, didn't say where he had known my father from, didn't say when they had met. Just gave one brief nod and walked away. I watched until he disappeared around the bend in the corridor. Didn't ask. There are things people say and then leave alone, needing nothing added, needing no explanation. You only need to stand with it for a while. That's enough. I went to the garden near the second watch, not because I couldn't sleep. Just because I wanted to sit by that pond one more time, but without the purple fabric in my hand, without the worry pressing tight inside my chest, this time just to sit. Watch the water, listen to the wind. Familiar footsteps behind me. I didn't turn around. The Emperor sat down beside me, the same spot, the same pond. But the air tonight was different, lighter, wider, like the sky clearing after a long rain. We sat in silence for a long time. You have any regrets? I asked, didn't look at him. Only looked at the surface of the water. Regrets about what? Everything, I said. From the beginning until now. The Emperor didn't answer right away. Sat there looking at the pond alongside me long enough that I thought he wouldn't answer at all. No, he said, just the one word. But the way he said it, without hesitation, without adding or taking anything away, meant I didn't need to ask anything more. I nodded, said nothing more. Nothing more needed to be said. We sat there until the wind shifted and told us it was nearly dawn. 2 people. A still pond, distant lanterns swaying gently. And for the first time in a very long time, I sat beside someone without needing to watch for anything at all. The next morning, for the first time since entering the palace, I woke up without counting my breaths. No practicing how to walk. No rehearsing names. No reminding myself what role I was supposed to be playing. The palace maids came to dress me. I stood still and let them. Not because it was required, but because this morning I didn't need to prove anything to myself anymore. Kui Lion stood in the corner of the room watching me. She smiled faintly, the smile of someone seeing something finally in the right place after a long time. I walked out into the corridor. Morning sunlight poured in from the east, golden and real. The sound of birds from the back garden. The scent of white camellia flowers from the pots lining the corridor, the flower my sister loved. Something I had remembered since before the wedding and still remembered now. At the end of the corridor, the Emperor was standing looking out at the courtyard, hands behind his back as usual. He heard footsteps and turned, looked at me. I looked back at him. Neither of us said anything. Nothing needed to be said. There are moments when people stand together and everything that needed to be said has already been said, one way or another, in long nights and brief mornings, and the time spent sitting in silence by the pond. I walked forward, stood beside him. Looked out at the courtyard, the same direction, the same courtyard, the same morning. The lanterns from the night before were still hanging, a few swaying gently in the early breeze, their red light fading softly in the new morning light, just standing here. This morning, beside this person. That is enough. I walked into the palace with one thing I told myself, just one night in the end, that one night stretched so long I lost count of when I had stopped counting. And by the time I realized I had stopped counting long ago, I no longer wanted to count at all. The one who set the trap for us, who calculated every step, who schemed his entire life, turned out to be the one who brought the two of us together without meaning to. Han Ming Yuan surely didn't expect that. Neither did I. Perhaps only one person did, the person who sat waiting for 3 years, noting down every small detail, knowing that sooner or later I would walk through that door. And you, If you were forced to step into something that wasn't yours, and inside that place you found the most real thing in your life, would you sign your real name? Or would you still tell yourself just one night and keep pretending you were only passing through?